just to prove to you the excessive doubt that I had, I thought about this every single time that I was asked to go out to eat. And I would be thinking in my head, well, which one does God want me to go to? And which would not get me sick? Where am I supposed to go? I can't choose which place to go to eat because then it's up to me if somebody gets sick. Then it's my fault. I'm geeking right now. Welcome to Please Excuse My OCD. That sounds weird. That feels weird. Welcome. If you're new here, my name is Tyler. If you were here for episode 1, welcome back. I'm blown away. Coming into this, I expected nothing. I was like, who's going to listen to me? I mean, I know a lot about OCD. I've had it my whole life. I feel like I can share a lot about it and help a few people out. And to see people come together, I mean, tuning in to listen is just crazy. So thank you if you are new here. Thank you if you're returning. I'm so happy to be here. This is not going to be just a regular podcast where I spit facts. This is going to be a real conversation about what it is that I can bring to the table with my experience with OCD and maybe how it can relate to you. This is a disclaimer. I am not a medical professional. I am simply someone who has had OCD for most of his life, if not all of it, and I'm here to share my experience with it as it relates to everyday life. If you are struggling, please seek advice from a trained professional. And without further ado, today, God, you know what? I just want to let you know, I feel like a total fuckboy today. Backwards hat. I'm having a bad hair day, so I was like, I'm gonna put on the cap today, drink my coffee, and I'm just gonna roll with it. I had like a super rough past few weeks. Whenever it's after the holidays, I feel like complete total garbage, but that's fine. And so I figured, you know what? And I very rarely cry. I don't know if it's my medication or what, but lately I've been letting them go. I'm like, you know what? I feel better crying in my sweatshirt with my logo on it than I do with a Tommy Hilfiger shirt on. Whenever you see me in this sweatshirt, it's probably because I've been letting a few tears roll, but we're good. Totally fine. It's just a new year, and after the holidays, I'm kind of like processing some things and always reflecting on my life, and maybe I'll cry in front of you guys one day. I mean, that would be cool. To be honest with you, I've had like the next 6 episodes stacked up in a Word doc because I am on the fucking ball. But I went to go visit my brother earlier, and I was just thinking about my life on the way home because, I'm going through it, just like I'm sure many of you are right now. It made me start thinking about like my life as a whole and the choices that I've made and the choices that I make every day. And something that occurred to me was really how hard it is for me to make choices and decisions in my life, my everyday life, and how hard it's been for me since I was a kid. And I know that like most people can relate to making decisions. It's like which school you want to go to, or what sport you want to play this fall, or who do I want to date? What kind of person do I want in my life? Or even like what kind of Starbucks coffee am I going to get? A grande? Am I going to get like a tall? What am I getting today? I feel like from the monumental to the minute of the choices we make, they're all choices, and they can be so infuriatingly, is that even a word? Infuriatingly? I don't know. Choices can be so hard to make for someone with OCD. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about that decision making. It's so important, but nobody talks about it. Something that people with OCD have trouble with is their excessive doubt. We already don't trust ourselves. We already don't trust, well, why am I having that thought? Or, well, I've tried to get rid of that thought before and it didn't work. It doesn't matter what it is. So for example, when I was younger, I grew up Roman Catholic. Like I was raised Catholic. I do no longer adhere to any religion, and that's a story for another time. But growing up, I always felt like there was some dude in the sky watching me take a shit or watching me getting out of the shower. And so every little thing that I did, I'm thinking, this dude's watching me and he already knows what I'm going to do. So he's not going to put me down the wrong path. But also I've been fucked up a few times and I've gotten beat a few times here. So he loves me. My obsessions dealt with food poisoning and getting sick. And I remember Friday nights, my parents used to be like, so like, Tyler, where do you want to go to eat? I would be like, no, I'm good. I'm going to stay home. You guys get food. I don't want to get sick. And then the times that I would actually push myself to leave the house and go with my parents, I had extreme anxiety because I was like, okay, so now it's up to me to pick the restaurant that we go to. What if I pick a restaurant that gets me sick? Or like, what if I pick a restaurant that gets my dad sick or my mom sick? Like, I won't be able to live with myself. Like, oh my God. You know, being like 12 years old, having these kind of thoughts, it's like, what the fuck? There was one time that I just remember vividly trying to decide. I mean, first of all, hey, I was looking at Burger King, McDonald's, and Applebee's. Those are not the top 3 choices that I would go to if I was somebody who had a fear of getting sick, but I digress. And I would be thinking in my head, well, which one does God want me to go to? There's actually so much about religion and OCD that I'll go into depth with another time. But just to prove to you the excessive doubt that I had, I would literally be overthinking which one that I should be going to based on what God wanted me to do and which would not get me sick. I thought about this every single time that I was asked to go out to eat. Where am I supposed to go? Like I can't choose which place to go to eat because then it's up to me if somebody gets sick. Then it's my fault. And again, my obsessions revolved around getting sick, around food. My obsessions were so intense for me that I felt like the only way that I could control them was to not even expose myself to going out to eat. That created more doubt because I wasn't actually making choices. I was using my compulsions, which were staying in and being like, you choose. At least if I knew that dad chose, if something happened, it wasn't my fault. I wasn't actually stepping up and making choices to help myself trust myself more. And even now, at 29 years old, I just went through a massive life change, moved back home, trying to figure some shit out. That itself, I was like, okay, do I move back home? Do I move somewhere else? Do I leave the state? What the fuck do I do? Now I have the knowledge to listen, you just got to make the choice and then figure it out as you go. And even then, knowing that and knowing the knowledge and knowing the coping mechanisms, it's still very hard for me to make a choice in general. I still have that black and white thinking and it's still hard. I mean, everybody has doubt, but to the point where you stop making a choice, to the point where you have to act out your compulsions to avoid the decision-making process and you're stuck. I'm sure many of you can relate to this, but I'm talking about in terms of OCD, it is just completely blown out of proportion based on the person's obsession. Another point in regards to making decisions with OCD, there is a fear of making the wrong decision. It's not just fear of making a decision, it's fear of making the wrong decision. Completely black or white thinking. If I do this, then this is going to happen and then I'm fucked the rest of my life. That kind of thinking. And I dealt with that, most recently moving back home. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if I move back home, what if I don't get back on my feet? Or what if I move out? What if I actually choose to go out on my own? Am I going to go broke for the rest of my life? Like there's no in between. You think there's a right choice and you think there's a wrong choice and that's it. Now I feel like my fears are based in the fear of not being good enough, the fear of failure. And it's so weird because I feel like I had way less of a fear of failure growing up than I do now. The stuff growing up was more, I still have a germ fear. I still have illness phobias, but now my fears reside in like life and failure. I will tell you stories. You're going to fucking hear my stories. The fear of making the wrong decision is something that I'm aware of. I'm aware that I'm scared of making the wrong decision. I'm aware that I'm having black and white thinking where I'm like, this decision's either going to be the best decision of my life or the worst decision of my life. And every decision feels like that. What do I do? And you think that your whole life is dictated by this one choice. And it's just not the reality. I'm sure there's certain choices that you think about that you've made throughout your life that like stand out, like very rarely are you thinking of certain choices that you made like 10 years ago. Most likely there's probably a lot of choices that you're making right now that you're never going to think of again. Wow. This mic stand, by the way, my brother got it for me for Christmas. It's nice. Anyways, the need for perfectionism. I run my own business as a music producer and mix engineer. And I recently came across a quote. Excuse me for not remembering who said this, but the quote was, "Progress, not perfection." And yeah, it sounds great. And as a business person, it sounds wonderful. But as an OCD creative, no. Okay, so when I'm mixing music, I keep I have to make sure that, if I have like the bass at like negative 12.2 decibels, we're going to bring that down to negative 12.5 because I like everything at 0.5. I need my mixes to be absolute perfect in my eyes, whether that's visually, color coordinated, or audio wise, before I send them to my clients. I may not be able to send a mix to someone until I know that it's perfect, even if it's not like really done yet. But I know I'm like, if this was to get released today, then I would be okay with that. And I don't know if that's like a creative thing or if that's more like the OCD part of me. I definitely know like the numbers and colors and all that stuff is like an OCD tendency that I have when it comes to mixing music in my sessions. But I feel like the need for perfectionism for me does stop me from making choices. It's like, oh, I won't do that until I get this. Or the kind of thinking where it's like, I won't open up the next session until this session is perfect. And sometimes that stops my workflow. It really like puts me behind. And what I mean by that is session A does not have to be perfect for me to at least start session B. And I can multitask really well. I can, especially in music, like most of the time I will have 5 or 6 projects open at a time. And it takes so much for me to do that mentally, to be able to cognitively and with a lot of awareness say, okay, we're opening another project. You have the capacity to do it. It's okay if the other projects you're working on are not perfect yet, but we need to get things going. We need to keep the line moving here. For people with OCD, that's really hard to do. It's like, I sometimes can't leave the house unless I know my room is in perfect shape. When I was a kid, I don't know if this is an OCD thing, so if somebody knows this, let me know. But when I was a kid, I couldn't leave the house to go out to eat unless I had one of my favorite toys with me. If I had 2 favorite toys, I was a mess. I was like, I can't not 2. Now I have 2 favorites. It was weird. I don't know what that is, but if my favorite thing was like a Woody from Toy Story doll, and then the new Game Boy, I had a really hard time leaving the house unless I could really figure out which one I loved more. So I don't know if that is a part of it, but when I was younger, I remember that being a big issue for me. And now as an adult, I'm like, okay, my room is not the way that I want it to be. I can't do anything until the room is perfect, in my eyes at least. And that's basically what I'm saying, because that runs over into my work as a music producer, to not move forward unless everything else is perfect. And that's just not the way life works. Although this is not lined up or where I want it to be, I can still do this. And that's basically what I'm trying to portray here for people with OCD, is even though it's not perfect, whatever it is, we can still move forward. Compulsive behavior. I talked a little bit about this with the decision making in terms of which restaurant I was asked to eat at when I was a child. The compulsive behavior that I would engage in would be to not leave the house, eat something safe that I knew was good here, or if I had no choice, let mom and dad pick where they wanted to go. That was my compulsion, to the obsession of don't want to get sick, can't make this choice. Also don't want to be responsible for other people getting sick. Can't make that choice. So that's what I mean by compulsive behavior, is you'll still act out your compulsions to avoid making the decision. This could look like, if you are afraid of failure like me, you may not start the project. You may not start the business. That could be looked at. If all of your thoughts are really right now surrounding failure, your compulsion might be to avoid, which makes you feel more comfortable, because if I don't open the project, there's no chance for me to fail. I talked a little bit about this earlier. Cognitive distortions, black or white thinking. We tend to think that everything is black or white. This is the right decision for me. This is the wrong decision. And you don't have to have OCD to think this way. You don't. You can literally be just the coolest person in the world who has no fear, no anxiety, nothing bothers them. You might still think this is the best for me or this is the worst for me. And sometimes it's just not the case. That thinking keeps you stuck in the OCD cycle of, oh no, fear, gotta act out my compulsion. Okay, we're safe. Oh no, fear, act out the compulsion. We're safe. Then you keep doing this cycle, no decisions are being made, and you're stuck. How do you get out of that? I really feel like it comes down to trusting yourself, right? What does trusting yourself look like? So for me, it's not necessarily making the choice and still fucking up, because you can still trust yourself with that same outcome. If you do the project that you've been avoiding and it sucks and people realize that you're a failure or that you suck or whatever it is, you now have to deal with that. And you will, because when you end up getting back up and you look back, you actually end up proving to yourself that, hey, we still fucked up. Things still went to shit, but we survived it. It's not black or white. It's not life or death. We survived the shitty moment. That's one way that you can look at trusting yourself is, hey, even if I fail, even if the worst that I think could happen does happen, I can still deal with it and still make it through. And also, sometimes you make choices and it does work out really well. Sometimes you make choices and the things that you are afraid of don't happen. Sometimes you make choices and the outcomes are way better than they've ever been. And that's another way to show trust in yourself, right? It's another way to be like, hey, you know what? Like, I made that choice even when I was unsure and I was really scared. But fuck, I'm so fucking happy I did. You know, that's the trusting in yourself that I'm talking about, where it's not just the failure and trusting yourself. It's also the, you never know how it could come out. You know how many times I was like, I really want to get Chick-fil-A, but does God want me to get Chick-fil-A? Dude, I fucking wanted Chick-fil-A and I got Chick-fil-A and I was fucking happy I got it. There was a time or two where I won't go into detail about that. Maybe I will. Maybe someday I will go into detail about it. I don't know. This podcast is a free-for-all for everybody. We can say whatever the hell we want here. Sometimes it turns out really well. And I know it's not so simple. And this is something I've been working on in therapy for years. I've been with the same therapist for 5 years. Ingrid, shout out. Love you so much. And making decisions and trusting myself through the OCD cycle. This is why I wanted to talk about it, because, you know, the new year comes and everybody's like, all these resolutions, everybody gets hard off of them. It's like, that's great. But then you jump in and then you start to not trust yourself because you're not holding yourself accountable. You're not actually going through the process of, well, what if I did make this choice? What if I did show up? What if I started small? That's another way to trust yourself, is stop making big choices right out of the gate. If this is the first time that you're going out to live with a partner and you're unsure of where you want to live or if this is the right person to live with, maybe you need to do it to trust yourself. But maybe that's not where we want to start. Decision-making practice, right? Setting yourself up for success. This goes down to the small. You want to start changing your life for the positive. We're not going to start the business right now. Let's go get the loan. Maybe it starts with setting your alarm a half hour earlier and trusting yourself to get up. For me, moving back home, that's how I had to start trusting myself again. I set my alarm earlier. I got back into the gym. You know, I wasn't like, I'm going to go to the gym 7 days a week, gym bros, yeah. Okay, let's start off, 3 to 4 times a week. Start off twice a week. And if you can start there and you can show yourself in these little moments that you can trust yourself, that you can show up, that's not only how you build good habits, but that's how you start building a better relationship with yourself, to trust yourself in the toughest of times when you're like, I can't trust myself to make the right decision. I can't trust myself to leave the house even though I just touched the stove like 20 times. Like, I've been there. Like, there was one morning in college where I was late for class. I think it was like, I ended up being a half hour late for class because I kept touching the stove. And I was like, is it on? Is it off? Is it off? And I knew it was off. It was there. Like, I was there. I touched them all plenty of times. If something happens, that was not me, because I saw everything. It was off. I trust myself. I trust myself. Even that is really hard to do, but this is why I say start with the small. Start with the small to start building confidence and trust in yourself, because that's how you can start trusting yourself for the bigger decisions. Setting time limits. I love alarms. That has actually helped me recently in most recent years. I don't have the ability to perfect every little thing anymore, and it eats me up alive. And I have other people relying on me. It's not just me anymore. I had no choice but to set alarms for different tasks, prioritizing my tasks, doing them in a timely manner, being able to look at myself and say, hey, I trust the work I'm doing. I know it's not perfect, but we can come back to this. As much as it's eating me up inside myself, as much as I just am crawling out of my skin because it's not there, we need to move forward. The trust that I have in myself now is not even close to the trust that I had in myself when I was younger. I had no trust in myself when I was younger. I didn't trust my thoughts. I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust anything about who I was, even though I was a good kid. I didn't do nothing. I was just so scared all the time. No, I don't give a fuck. Just kidding. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help you work through these different issues that OCD presents itself with. Exposure response prevention, when they're exposing you to the threat and you are changing how you respond to it by not acting out the compulsion. Trusting in yourself that it's going to be okay if I don't seek safety. That kind of thinking, that kind of behavior can help you trust in yourself more. So I hope this clears a little bit up as far as why decision making might be harder for somebody with OCD as it is just for the regular person. Even if you don't trust yourself fully, just getting back to a place where you know that if you make a decision, you'll be able to deal with it. At the end of last episode, I asked people to submit questions, and you can submit a question on my website, www.pleaseexcusemyocd.com/askmeaquestion, and I will be answering them here every week. I put the link in the show notes. I am going to answer a few questions. Here we go. First one comes from Zach. What's a coping mechanism that you felt helped you the most to suppress your OCD? I wouldn't call it suppressing my OCD, because my OCD is it's always there. It's just how my brain is wired. It's how it works. It's how it always will work. Of course, besides medication, besides therapy, one of the biggest tools that I've been using is challenging my beliefs by asking myself questions to oppose the things that I'm afraid of. For example, if, where do I want to eat tonight? Here's my top 3 choices. Which one's the least to make me sick? And then I get frozen and I'm like, okay, I can't make a choice. It's walking myself through the process. Okay, if this happens, we will be able to deal with it like this. It's not the end of the world. It feels like the end of the world, but you know what it's like to be sick. You know what it's like to get this. You know what it's like to fail. You know what it's like to meet the things that you're afraid of. And as scary as they are, you've gotten through them. Playing that game with myself and really talking myself through it, almost like a pep talk. That's been one thing that I can honestly say across the board through all of my obsessions since being with my most recent therapist has helped me. Another tool I think that has helped me with my OCD is distance. And what I mean by distance is there are certain things, right, where I told you the story of when I was late for class and I kept touching the stove. It would eat me up inside to leave the house. Physically, I felt like the inside of myself was crawling out of, I was like, "Wah!" It's funny, once I reached a mile down the road to school, the thought just went away. At that point, I was far enough away from home where I was like, you're not going to turn around now, so we're good. Let's just keep going. On to the next thing that we're obsessed with. I knew that once I got in the car and I was able to get far enough away from being home, I knew that I was able to deal with the fact that I could continue to go to where I needed to go. When it was really bad, there were certain times where I had to. I'd be almost at school and go back home. But as I started to work through it and learn to trust myself more and to continue getting to school, even though I wanted to turn around, I built more of that trust in with myself, kind of like a safety net for myself. So creating that distance from being home and touching the stoves to actually going to where I need to go, even though I feel like I want to crawl out of my skin. Okay, question number 2. This one comes from Erin. How has OCD played a role in your dating life? Erin, let me tell you, this is a topic that I'm going to be going into depth about quite a bit. Probably on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 episodes, maybe 9. Maybe I'll always talk about my dating life with OCD because it's just so gosh darn fun. It has played a significant role in my dating life because very rarely in the beginning am I vulnerable enough to open up about it with someone, let her see that side of me. If I know something's going to trigger me, we don't go there. It's really hard to date with OCD if you're with someone who doesn't have the patience to deal with the different sides of OCD that come up, because there's also the seeking reassurance side of OCD that is extremely hard to deal with for anybody who loves somebody with OCD. Like, I know my mom, like, I used to, with my obsessions, I would constantly check in with her and be like, are you sure I wouldn't do this? Are you sure this wouldn't happen? She'd be like, yes, Tyler, yes. And my mom was a fucking saint for being able to endure that with strength, positivity, and also patience, because hearing the same question like 50 times, after a while, probably will get annoying. Doesn't matter what the question is. So if your, fear revolves around, let's say, cooking chicken in general just irks me, and you see your partner cooking chicken, you might be over her shoulder or his shoulder being like, hey, did you wash did you use gloves to touch the chicken? Are you using different utensils as you flip the chicken? You're not using this, there's a lot of checking. There's a lot of reassurance. There's, cutting every single aspect of the chicken when it's done. And if your partner's there and they're looking at you is this done? Like, they might feel a little bit self-conscious, but that's what I mean is, when you're dating and you end up coming to a point where you're being vulnerable and you're letting your partner see these sides of yourself, just really be aware of how your partner's reacting, because you can get a really good glimpse on if they, 1, want to understand more, 2, want to understand how your brain works, 3, wants to understand how to help you, and 4, how patient they are. Because it's not enough to just reassure someone. It's not enough to want to learn, but it's also having the patience to be like, okay, they're having a spell. Okay, what do I need to do now? Right? That's super important. I wouldn't say that I get vulnerable enough right off the bat where I just let anybody see that side of me. I think dating with OCD is definitely hard. However, I've managed to do it because I am a very open person, but I am very selective with how far I get with someone to become that open. If I can tell that they're not a patient person, if I can tell that they don't really have the deepness to understand really what goes on behind OCD, then I have a pretty good gauge on whether or not it's worth continuing, whether or not it's something that I want to go into detail with or be vulnerable with. But it's present in everything. I'm going to have to make another episode to talk about relationships and OCD and stuff because it's so in depth. But to answer your question, yes, it's fucking there. This one is from Paige W. And she says, how have you found ways to cope with OCD? She has another part of the question, which I'll answer in a sec. But how have I found ways to cope with OCD? I recommend if you feel that you're struggling, get a therapist. Talk to your doctor. Ways that I cope have been medication, therapy, mindfulness. I practice the Buddha, right? I practice meditation quite often. That helps with the intrusive thought aspect of just being able to monitor your thoughts without getting involved with them, right? Being able to look at your thoughts from an outside perspective, not identifying with them. So mindfulness, therapy, medication, and exercise, those 4, all 4 components are part of my weekly routine, if not my daily routine. And those have been acquired through years and years of not only going to therapy, but having no choice but to practice it, because there were times where it was so bad, I just couldn't leave the house, right? So I didn't want to live like that. I was scared to live like that. I became afraid of fear itself. You don't want to be afraid of fear. But the other side of the question was, what was it like to be able to relate to someone else with OCD for the first time? I don't remember really knowing anybody who had OCD growing up besides my mom. And it didn't really click that my mom had OCD until I was diagnosed with it, because mom was just mom to me. She was always cleaning and super neat, which, like I've said before, it's not just an indicator of OCD. There needs to be more than just that, I think, for it to be full-blown OCD. Once it clicked in my mind, I was like, oh, okay, so my mom definitely deals with OCD tendencies. That explains a lot. But once I actually became public with my OCD experience, a lot of people came out of the woodwork to tell me about theirs. And I had done a whole documentary with my friend Mitch. Once I put that out, I mean, there were thousands of people just reaching out about their OCD and how much the video helped them. And that kind of ignited a deep connection with people who have OCD, because I just feel like there's such a big community out there of people who need help. They don't understand their OCD. They don't understand where to start. That's a big reason why I feel like it's so important to talk about it, because the more that people talk about it, the more that people can relate to it, less they feel alone. And so I encourage anybody, if they're struggling, to, one, of course, talk to a therapist or a doctor, a trained professional of some sort, but also to keep the conversation going. I mean, I'm here encouraging you to get involved, to comment here in the show notes, ask questions. I mean, you can submit a question on my website. Oh, my daughter Banja, my little girl. Come on, Banja, come on. I want to see if she comes on the camera. I told you guys that Banja was going to be popping in and out. Hi. Guys, my Banja. She has helped me through an incredible amount of fear. Animals are a huge part, I believe, in healing. So thank you for hanging out with me today. I appreciate every single person who shows up, has a listen. If you like what you're hearing here, maybe give me a follow, give a nice 5-star rating. We love the number 5. I told you guys that. And share this podcast with a friend. If you think somebody could benefit from this podcast, please share it. You can visit my website, www.pleaseexcusemyocd.com, to submit a question, sign up for the newsletter that we're going to be rolling out later on this year, and the merch. I will see you next week.